Okay, to kick off again, thank you so much for everybody that has made it to our employment prep workshop. This is our second such workshop. The first one we did was back in May, and I got to know a lot of you then. I'd like to get to know more of you now as we're going into our second workshop. And then of course, as pre-veterans becoming more mature in the marketplace and our service offerings get to be larger. The other intent behind this is obviously let you know more about pre-veteran. I'd also like to let you, learn more about me and, a little bit of my history, because my history is very much your history. It's very similar to a lot of the experiences that we have are very similar. So going into the first slide here, I'd like to say kind of what the very loose end rules are for the evening. The first is simple, call me Jason, right? It's my name. Nothing besides that, unless you want to get creative with that. You can go ahead and just call me Jason. I'd be happy to do that. Make yourself comfortable. This is supposed to be a pleasant experience where we sit back, we have some fun, we learn a lot, we ask questions. So the next 2 points of have fun and ask questions, really take those to heart if you don't mind. This is really time for you, and I'm here to get you as much good information as I can. I'm also here to have you think differently, and we'll get to that in a moment. But that kind of brings up another point of make sure you're asking questions. And if we're going through the material here in a moment and you're not understanding it, or it's something maybe different than you had heard, or it's unclear, please speak up. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Every time we do this iteratively, it gets better. So we appreciate that kind of feedback. With that in mind right now, one thing I'd like to do, because we have a quiz that several of you have taken, but I'm going to put the quiz URL in the chat box right now. And I'll tell you what we're going to do is we're actually going to show you real-time feedback from this quiz. So everybody's going to have it in their chat right now. If you want to take just 2 moments to go through that, it should be 8-ish questions, but if you do that, it's really going to be interesting to see the results in real time as we go through it and discuss how this is very applicable to how you're addressing your transition right now. So I'll kind of sit back here just for a moment. And for those that want to take the quiz or are willing to take the quiz, we'll do that and we'll look at the results. So while we're kind of doing that and people are kind of taking the quiz, I would like to know if whoever thinks they're the farthest away, I know Chris is like a good contender right now. Who, if you could type into the chat, if you're familiar with that function, since we're all kind of in this COVID world, write in if you think you're one of the farther away from the US right now. I'd like to see who's got the farthest away. Again, I think Chris is probably gonna win this one. Go ahead and put it in the chat box. Oh, nice. We got Hawaii. All right, right on. Hawaii doesn't count, man. It's too nice. You know what I mean? It's one of those places where you're like, I don't know. People say that about Wyoming all the time. They're like, wow, it's really nice up there. And I'm like, ooh, Columbia. Fabio, you in Columbia this week? Jersey. All right.
I'll spend my winter here in Columbia.
Man, that's awesome. That is really cool. Ohio, is that far enough?
Recording in progress.
I'm thinking Ohio, that I'm not sure that's going to win it. Down the street from Chris Ingleton. Okay, so we got Scott. I know we got a couple Aussie folks here. There were going to be a couple folks from Japan. Is anybody on from Japan? Okay. So we have Liz saying now in Texas and missing Wyoming. And of course, right? So, hey, we are going to move on. Thank you for taking that quiz, or at least considering taking that quiz. I think the results are going to be pretty interesting as we kind of go through this real time. So the other thing I wanted to do was bullet number 6 here, which was make sure you stay to the end, because there's a Q&A that I want to answer. I'll stay as long as there are questions for this. And then there's a bonus at the end of this that I will make you aware of, and I think you'll enjoy. All right. So this is kind of the loose agenda that's out there right now, but it is 4 or 5 different points. The first thing I'm going to do is kind of take you very briefly through my journey, my transition story, And then we're going to go into what I think, because this is an employment prep workshop, I want to tell you about the problem, and it's a really data-driven problem that I'm going to bring to you after doing years and years of research, and you'll see that in my journey as well. And then finally, I think we've narrowed it down to a root cause, and this root cause is something that we're calling military transition 1.0 ecosystem. I know you've never heard that. It's something we're creating to better explain the phenomenon that's happening right now, and we're going to get very specific about that in this workshop. And then we're going to go into those quiz results. So those quiz results are actually going to see if the assumptions we've made in there about military transition 1.0 are holding true. And then the solution is what PreVeteran calls the military transition 2.0 world. And I want to get your thoughts on that. And then I want to show you what our offerings are that go into the 2.0 solution. And then finally, we're going to finish with a Q&A. So that is the rough agenda. Okay. Here we go, right? Hold on to your seatbelts here. And I want you to know about my journey, because I think a lot of the things that happened with me are going to be things that happen with you, and we're going to go through it. So bear with me on the first few slides here. It's actually build a slide, right? So I want to go through it in a chronological order so it makes sense, and then we can focus on those points, because I think a lot of them are going to be germane to you. So I had a planned retirement in 2014. And in 2012, I'm like, we all know on this call that military transition is a physiological and psychological event. We know that to be true. It's going to bubble up in your head, and it sure did to me. So I went through the, what am I going to do, right? So from the what am I going to do, here were some of the options that my mind presented me. So one of the options was, should I do something completely different than I do now? Do I need to get another degree, potentially an MBA? Do I need to get my PMP, a project management professional or program management professional certification? Do I need to get my Six Sigma? And should I start my own business? So if you don't mind, again, if you feel inclined, tell me if those are some of the thoughts that were in your mind, and maybe even answered those in the quiz that was out there. So did anyone else kind of have those thoughts as I pause for a minute, or something that's similar? And feel free to talk, by the way. We should, feel comfortable talking. We're all friends here. Anybody?
Yeah, no, I absolutely, I did. I feel like no matter what I do, you're slightly behind sometimes at this point, right? So I'm not retired yet, but I'm getting close to that point. I got a few more months, and I look back, like I feel like I probably should have done more, and probably should have got more of those things while I was in, for sure.
Yep. So which one of those, if you don't mind telling me, did you have some of those or all of those kind of floating around in your mind that I have written right there?
Really, it's a search. Like to me, and again, this is my opinion, especially when you're diving into different job opportunities, right? Experience is big, but your bachelor's degree only takes you so far, right? So it usually is something encompassed with certifications like Six Sigma, or something more to kind of offset not just your education that you had and your experience, but something to help you be competitive.
Yep, exactly. Now, thanks for sharing that. So I want to tell you what I chose. You ready? So this is part of my history. I chose literally the least rational thought, right? In 2012, I said, should I start my own business? And kind of the backstory behind this is, what is the website we all go to when we're looking for a job? usajobs.gov, right? This is the go-to website that every single person, for the most part, in the military goes to, because that's what's comfortable. So I went there and I said, hey, we're going to move back to Wyoming. And I looked in there and I found a lumberjack. I am not kidding that it was a lumberjack in Northwest Wyoming. I'm like, wow, not quite my skill set, right? So I end up working with my wife, talking through this, and said, the only thing we could do is start a business, right? And I'll take 2 years from 2012 to 2014 to figure it out. And then we'll be able to seamlessly transition into Wyoming. That was the thought process, just so you know. So that was the eureka moment that I had in the car on I-95, because I was at the Pentagon at the time, heading up to heading back up to the Pentagon from, King's Dominion or something. And I was starting to really get concerned that I couldn't find a job, couldn't make money, couldn't put food on the table, couldn't keep the normal status. And I understand that's exactly how you feel. And I understand you because that's exactly how I felt. So during that eureka moment, after that, I ended up being so enthralled with the idea here that I actually ended up writing a book about it. And what's interesting about the book is, I ended up just kind of telling other people about my journey, and that was just, I just want to let you know that was part of my journey, that I did have the freak out. I had a couple irrational thoughts in my head, and we'll get into that specifically in a few slides, but this was part of my journey. So I want you to know, I know exactly what you're talking about. So here's my continuation journey up to the present. I'll make it quick. So once I transitioned, kind of going back to the entrepreneurial phase, which again, I'm not suggesting that's a viable pathway for everybody. I did get my mind out of the public sector and into the private sector, and that actually helped me self-transform a lot, which is why we'll talk about self-transformation in a minute. So the next thing that happens is we move back to Wyoming. We're making a little bit of money on that business. And I have a friend who came to the Pentagon to me, or came to talk to me at the Pentagon all the time. And he worked with Rockwell Collins, which was a bigger defense contractor, top 5. And he said, hey, there's a role open I think you might like. It's a business development role. It's a remote role. And back in 2014, that is very, very uncommon. So I end up saying that looks attractive. I end up submitting a resume, doing interviews, got the job. It was the only single job I applied for. That's how serious I was about small business at that time. So going to Rockwell Collins, but what was more important, more interesting than that is because I had become a lot more entrepreneurial and more business minded in my own entrepreneurial journey, I noticed once I got in the company, I think I know how to increase your international sales, not knowing that this company, that's exactly what they wanted. So what ends up happening, against all odds, they end up promoting me to executive of North Asia, where I am the lead business person for Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. And I did that for a 3-year period. Amazing transformation where I learned everything from business development, strategy, product line, talent management, retention, everything you could think of. And that's where I kind of cut my teeth on the business world across a $6 billion business. And that's where I kind of gained my expertise on the business side of things. However, in my off time, and this was important, I was still thinking about transition. I was like, why was I successful? Why was I successful? Others weren't. And I said, what is going on in transition? So I began researching anything I could get my hands on in Tokyo, looked for VA studies, DOD studies, USC, Syracuse, Arizona State, you name it. Tried to find out what was going on. And I had a eureka moment there as well. And I understood that there is a problem with transition. And the problem with it is there's a 2-year period in post-transition where performance across many measures, to include employment, higher education, wellness, and entrepreneurship, we as a veteran class do not perform well at all. So I figured out the what. The what was the 2-year period that's challenging and problematic, and obviously something we want you to avoid, which is why we created PreVeteran. Now, once I figured out the 2-year gap that was there, the next thing I had to figure out is why this was happening. So long story short, I hired a cognitive neuroscientist. We went through how the brain thinks, and I ended up creating modeling that's very specific to PreVeteran. I'll get more specific in that in a minute, but that's my journey. And that's how we went from my transition experience to creating PreVeteran for you. Okay. So are there any questions about that? I always want to kind of take a pause because I tend to talk too much. Anybody? I heard somebody almost chime in. Okay, so I will move on.
Oh, are you still with Rockwell Collins, or you're totally just entrepreneur?
Good question. So I am actually still a full-time employee with Raytheon. And so Collins Aerospace was, Rockwell Collins was acquired by United Technologies, who then merged with Raytheon recently in the last couple of years. So I'm a full-time employee. A lot of interesting stories there, but I'll save that one for another one. Thanks for the question. So the next is here's the problem, and I want to kind of show you the data for that too. So the problem is we've got unemployment problems and we got poor retention, and kind of moreover, this has been kind of a historical problem. I'm showing you this, and I'll go through it quickly. I saw it. Nice one there, Brad. Thanks, man. Jason talks too much is nothing new. So true. So the unemployment data, you can see the dates here, 91 to 03, right? So I want to show you a range, and you can see the RSS is recently separated service members, and then the mean control group. You can see on average across those 3 years, we're two times as likely to be unemployed. I'm just showing you that, and that's to 2003. And then I'm showing you in another study, this shows from 2004 to 2011 that you're still facing high periods of unemployment up to 53%. What I'm basically saying, this has been a chronic problem. It's been around for decades and nothing has really changed appreciably. So that's the unemployment side. I want to show you the retention side now too. So the retention side is well known from a 2014 study published by Syracuse, is that 50% of veterans leave their first job within a year, and then 65% leave within 2 years. Most important is the context, right? The context is your civilian counterparts stay in a job 4 years, right? So if you look at it, half of us leave them within a year. We're leaving at 4 times a faster rate. And that's significant because bringing you on board to a company is a significant cost. It's going to be anywhere from $4,000 to $12,000 kind of across the board to get you into the company. The problem is once they train you, put you in the position, and you've had a bit of time there to kind of gain some proficiency, once they lose you, it's going to cost them anywhere from 50% of a salary to 200% of a salary to replace you. So these are real costs that are borne by a company, and you should care about that. I know that you're thinking about yourself right now, but from an employer standpoint, it makes us a very challenging talent pool to hire, is the point I'm trying to get across. Okay, so are there any questions about the unemployment data? And then I'm going to go into, I think, what's driving this, because I want you to be aware of it. Fabio, you got anything, man?
Hey, Jason, it's Chad Bondurant.
Yeah, go Chad.
So was there any analysis done on how similar the area that the person went into, like if they were, a pilot and then they went to fly for the airlines, or if they were, a doctor and then they transitioned to the medical field versus somebody trying to go into something completely different, and how successful they might have been?
Yeah, no, dude, awesome question. And that's kind of where my mind went when I was going through this research, because what you find out is that data in the DoD is very tight, right? I mean, they've got social security numbers, they know where you are, they know your rank, they know your name, they know your marriage status, everything. The second you go over to become a veteran, it's actually all volunteer based. A company technically by law can't ask you to disclose yourself as a veteran. So you can see that the numbers kind of start falling apart. So you have to depend on these studies that are out there that do survey type questions to kind of glean that information. So it's not going to be perfect, but it definitely paints a very clear picture of in the aggregate, right? And Chad, definitely there's going to be different parts of that, but in the aggregate, we're not performing well and we leave the job once we actually get it much faster than our counterparts. So in this next series of slides, I'm going to show you why precisely I think this is happening. So let me run through now I want to frame this as a military transition 1.0 environment. You haven't heard this before, but I'm going to describe what it is. So 1.0 environment is a TAP-centric environment. Transition Assistance Program, you all know it or have either gone through it or have heard of it, but we all kind of know the attributes, right? And these attributes actually come from studies. These are not my opinion, even though I have the same opinion, but it's very general in nature. It lacks individual specificity. It occurs too late in one's career, and it's more kind of check the box. This is what actual people that go through it are saying. So is there anyone that wants to kind of throw in the chat that disagrees with this, or they're like, oh yeah, that's definitely the case?
Yeah, so let me just talk real quick. So I'm Fabio. I met Jason through LinkedIn, and I'm a full-time sales associate for a defense company called L3 Harris, right? Harris Corporation. And I do defense sales for Marine Corps, Navy, and SOF. And it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do. I still do believe that I'm still trying to figure out whether I'm going to launch my own business. But I personally went into sales. I've quickly figured out that sales was my dream. But I was an intelligence analyst for the military. So
Yeah. Hey, Fabio, I think we're at mic problems there. He'll, so like Fabio was saying, he works for L3 Harris. I work for Collins. We just met recently. Sorry, Fabio, go ahead. I think we didn't have a great audio with you.
Just
much
it
better.
dawned on me as you were talking about this problem with a TAP program. I got out in 2012. I cannot remember how my transition was. It's like a blur in my mind. You know, how did I transition out? And I think, unfortunately, for the military enlisted, it starts with your acceptance of your ASVAB score and what the Navy offered me. Right? I had an ASVAB score that was good enough for me to pick any career. But think about those that were not as fortunate and they were stuck with maybe a 50, and this is the only 5 jobs you qualify for, Mr. So-and-so. And now you're stuck for the next 4 or 5 years. When you transition, you were a whole tech and you were maybe cleaning toilets for the Navy or helping out with plumbing, and you were a DC fireman. And it's not to talk bad about those jobs because they're very much needed, but you find yourself figuring out what the hell am I going to do when I get out? And I think that's where it starts, Jason. Unfortunately, it's a hell of a pipeline that just throws you a curveball when you least expect it, and it's only about 6 months before you gotta get the hell out, right?
Yep. No, I totally appreciate that perspective. I think I mean, you can see the comments right now. If you guys have the comments up, it's a check the box exercise. But here's really important thing that I want to show you how this influences your behavior you might not be aware of. So the point I want to kind of get across here is because of those attributes of the program, we got our little emoji scratching his head up there going, ooh, I need to kind of figure this out on my own. If nothing else, you're intuitively saying that to yourself, right? There's no doubt about that. So what do you do? Well, you're doing maybe not. Again, the quiz will tell us here in a minute. You're doing what the researchers are advocating out there and the influencers are talking about on social media. And they revolve around finding a mentor, building a network, doing informational interviews, and creating your master resume. So let me know if you're hearing that. Obviously, I've been researching this. I'm highly invested in the space. Let me know if that's something you're not hearing or if you are definitely hearing.
Yeah, Jason, Jamie again. Yeah, sorry, buddy, but no, I just went through it probably about 2 weeks ago, and that whole circle of life, you know, that you got there was true to its intent, 100%, and that's like 2 weeks into it. I mean, 2 weeks ago.
Yep, exactly. So I'm going to show you the result of this, where it gets interesting. And this is something I really want you to think about, right? Okay. So if this is what you're supposed to be doing, because TAP is too general and is not specific enough, you got to ask, and I ask everyone I talk to individually about this, I ask them what their plan is. They always tell me this is their plan, but then I ask them these questions. What are you going to ask your mentor? What are you going to ask your network? What are you going to ask your informational interviewee? What resume are you going to create if you haven't found a role? Right? And this thing just falls apart, right? This whole concept that TAP created that facilitates you being a human, right? Going, I got to figure this out. Then actually you go to the next question and go, well, what am I going to ask him? What am I going to do? And you could just kind of see it loses wind very quickly, right? So we recognize this, and we recognize this as being the hallmark of the 1.0 system. And you got the funny in here, right? You got the Matt Dillon, and this is from what's that movie again? Something About Mary, and this is his veneers, right? So this is the this is kind of faking it, going, I think it's going to work, but I'm not quite sure it is. But in reality, what you're doing is spinning your wheels, and you know it. And then you're back to the beginning, like I was, and the cycle is reflective of what I call the military transition 1.0 system and the effect of that on you specifically, right? So anybody have a comment on that?
Yeah, hey Jason, this is Chris Singleton. The one thing I'll add to, the one thing I'll add as well, and I don't know how many folks have actually gone out and tried to ask, you know, mentor-like individuals or mentor-type individuals for any advice that they could share. One of the things that I kind of sort of concluded recently is that it really, depending on who you're talking to, the advice could be applicable, or it may not really be as applicable to you. I work for a retired two-star who, what I kind of sort of at least concluded from his retirement experience is the world of demand is very different for you as a retired GO as compared to if you're a retired 06 or a retired lieutenant colonel, you know, that kind of thing. What people are looking for from you. So to that end, when I originally tried to ask him the questions, try to kind of pick his brain a little bit about what transition might feel like and how to posture myself, given his experience working for MITRE, working for a couple of different civilian companies, it was almost kind of like you'll be fine. You do a good job. You'll be fine. People are gonna snatch you up, and that doesn't really tell me anything. So I just thought I'd share that.
Totally. Nope. And that's exactly what I was told, and I hear that so much from people. But it doesn't make you understand how to plan any better. I mean, that's the thing. And I talk to other people who go to mentors, but if you're not making progress and you go back to the mentor with the same question, you're kind of going back to that well again, and it's not helping, and it's kind of making the mentor go, what's going on here, right? And honestly, depending on the mentor you go to, they might not know any more than you at all, right? That's the other thing, is they may not actually be able to facilitate what you want to do, because then again, it all comes back to you, right? So this is going to get interesting. Let me show you this. So I'm going to go to the next slide. I hope you guys like Friends, right? So we're going to do the quiz results here live. Now, I just saw this Unagi episode lately. If you don't know what the Unagi part is, it's total awareness, right? It's total awareness. So I kind of use the humor here, and I'm going to pull over to the slide deck the results of the quiz. So remember what I just told you about military transition 1.0 and the hallmarks of that, right? So let's go through this. So we got 34 answers here. Now, there were some before this, so I think we got an additional at least 10 or 15 from this, so thank you for that. So are you married? Yes, right? Basically 80-20. By the way, I'm looking at this for the first time with you, okay? So children, yes, for the most part, 65-35. How confident are you that you understand the differences between the public and private sector? Right here, 86%, 85%, no or not at all, somewhat confident or not confident at all, right? These are hallmarks of the 1.0 ecosystem, right? Take a moment to think about your post-military transition. Can you see a clear path for how to get from where you are to a successful outcome? 60-40, no, right? Next, which of the following thoughts have entered your mind? And again, we just talked about this literally because these were the thoughts that entered my mind. Should I do something completely different? 75%. Do I need to get another degree? 68%. Do I need to get my PMP? 55%. Should I start my own business? And just so you know, the none of the above is 9%. So you could see this information is infiltrating your thinking process. So these are things, but if you take a step back and you start following each of these leads, you're going to quickly get overwhelmed and not get anywhere, right? You could get a new degree, but it's going to be 2 years later, 1 year later. And then at the end of that year, what have you lost by doing that? And have you progressed forward to where you need to in order to be successful, right? I mean, these are legitimate questions. So we'll finish up with this. Let me got a couple more jumping in the room. As part of your plan, what are the things you're doing to make these happen? Build a network, find a mentor, do informational interviews. Sound familiar? Okay, the next, this is interesting. Assuming you find that mentor, build a network, participate in informational interviews, do you know what to ask them? Not really, or sort of, at 94%, right? Again, I'm just reflecting back to you what you're telling me within the framework of a 1.0 ecosystem that is not working. And that's kind of the point we're trying to stress upon everybody. Here's kind of the most telling. How confident are you that what you're taking will yield success? 53% of you say a flip of a coin, right? There's 25 that feel confident at 70%, but even 70%, is that enough? And then you kind of go down here, right? 20%, 10%. So between the 50, 20, and 10, what are we looking at? 63, 70%-ish are saying it's a flip of a coin or less that I'm going to be successful. And if you're a breadwinner and you have kids and you have a family, are you really happy or good with that? I'm just asking the question. I'm not here to tell you how to think. I'm just telling you how to help you think through this problem in a different way. That's why we're here, right? So, unagi. So now that you know that, right? I mean, are there any questions on whether or not you're in a 1.0 environment? And then I'm going to show you how to get to a 2.0 environment. So are there any questions on the 1.0 side? Or any objections? I'm happy to take objections too. I mean, that's, I want this to be as refined and clean as possible, so it's easy to understand, because it's a complex environment. So if there are any questions, please let me know.
So Jason, I do think that one of the great things that people are doing is LinkedIn is kicking, you know, up in popularity, and military veterans are all over it, even a couple of years out before transition. I just saw a comment about somebody being active 5 years out, which that is, I applaud that. You know, 5 years out, knowing that you're going to get in 5 years with as much as that can happen in 5 years, you know, I definitely applaud the link, the networking now. So that's pretty cool.
Definitely. Any other comments? Okay, so what we're going to do is then go into what our solution is, right? So this is where we kind of put a stake in the ground and say, this is how we are different. And we just want to make it as an offer to you and explain why we think this is important. So PreVeteran, right? PreVeteran, just even in the word, says before you're a veteran, right? And then I kind of told you about in my individual story how I was very confused as to why I was successful, why others weren't. And then I wanted to figure out why. And the why ended up taking me down the road of going through several academic disciplines, but then landing on cognitive neuroscience, because nothing is more profound than how your individual brain processes information, right? So we have our own proprietary cognitive neuroscience-based modeling. And then our program is hyper-focused on you as an individual by giving you individual tools, individual support, and having you promote new cognitive cycles, which means we give you new things to put in your head and remove some of the barriers that are there. And I know that sounds fuzzy, but we actually have a few people who have been through the program on the call right now, and you can ask them questions in a moment. But here is why this is so important, and I want this to be very simple, right? What you think influences your behavior influences your actions, and then your actions dictate your outcomes. Seriously, it's that simple. And then I throw Gandhi in there because that sounds like one of his quotes, right? I mean, it's just one of those things. I like that picture too. I was like, good. So does that make sense that we want to make it hyper individual, because the way you think drives your behaviors drive actions drive outcomes? Any questions on that? We'll take that as a no. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so this one's really important. And the other thing I want you to know about PreVeteran, if you're kind of getting used to us, is we talked pretty directly to you. We treat you like adults. We want to give you the data. We want you to challenge us, but we want to give you the data that's been assembled and show you what the challenges are that you're facing. And in this case, The challenge is actually you, right? There's a lot of you in there that's actually stopping yourself or holding yourself back from success. So let me go through a few attributes here. So we just discussed and we just showed you literally real time that we defined a military 1.0 ecosystem and then defined the attributes of that. And then we went through a quiz that a lot of you just did, and it reflects literally what we just said. So this 1.0 has influenced your thinking. You don't know what to do to prepare for military transition. That is bore out in the data as well. This one's real interesting, right? So I've been doing this for building this program for years. It's been launched since March of this year, but you are a digital avoider. What does that mean specifically? You do not like to digitally interact at all, right? And a lot of that goes to security clearances. A lot of it goes to what you've learned in the military. A lot of it is just like, yeah, I don't want to kind of put myself out there digitally. But here's the deal, right? We live in a digital world where everything has transformed to the digital kind of ecosystem and economy. You must interact digitally now, or you're putting yourself at a extremely high competitive disadvantage. And part of these bake into the 2-year challenging period that we talked to you about post-transition. But the digital avoider, you like to voyeur a lot, you like to read posts, you don't like to, and it's not like you need to, it's just because you don't, there's a discomfort there actually interacting digitally, which is actually hurting you, believe it or not. Are there any comments on that, by the way, or any objections or comments? from digital avoiders, say, I'm asking. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you know, I've had a LinkedIn account for a long time, but I've been checking it more frequently recently, and I'm kind of mixed on it. I think there's a lot of fluff that people are putting out there. So I don't know what my comment is. I guess I'm avoidant because I just think it's a lot of just hot air generally.
No, hey, and Andrew, I'm here to tell you, I think you're right. But the other part to that is if we look at just the broad trend of digitization, boy, that's hard to say that. Companies have now moved to Indeed, ZipRecruiter, and LinkedIn to source their talent because it's digitized. You could filter it, you could do it much quicker, which means if you're not actually out there and present on those platforms, you are absolutely at a competitive disadvantage. So it's really important that you become more, be able to engage digitally. So it's really important that, again, but I think the other thing you're kind of pulling string there is, well, how do I do that, right? So you need to find something that's going to teach you how to do that. And obviously we do that as well. So the digital avoider thing, I think is really, and it's not just LinkedIn, it's a lot more than that, right? So here's another one of your attributes. You do think you can do it on your own, right? And I'll tell you why here specifically, but you really think you can do it on your own, even though we just demonstrated you're not even confident in your own approach, right? So you can see there's some things to unravel there. You're spinning your wheels. You're spinning your wheels, right? Getting a bunch of comments. We know you're spinning your wheels. So just, this is another thing that just is something to think about. So the graphic I just showed you there is a portion of our cognitive neuroscience-based model. And what we're trying to show you there, and again, I don't mean to be provocative, I'm just being real with you because you guys are all adults and can think for yourselves. I'm telling you, I was like this, and I think you are too. You are equal parts ignorance and hubris when you're thinking about military transition. So let me be specific about that. What I mean by that is how your brain actually interacts with the external environment. So on the ignorance side in your brain, what happens is when you're trying to think, your brain uses memory. Well, what happens in the ignorance part is you've never transitioned out of the military before, so you have no long-term associated memories that relate to that, right? So what does that do? That provides you an inability to see a clear path forward, and it gives you a bunch of these good ideas. And those good ideas we've already went through. Should I do something completely different? Should I get another degree? Should I get my PMP, my Six Sigma? That's why your brain is telling you that, because it can't think through it. but it then kicks into its survival state. And it's like, I have got to give Jamie ideas. I've got to give Fabio ideas. And those are the ideas. And you've said so much in your quiz, right? So I think we've nailed this thing down pretty well. The other part of that is actually more insidious. So in your brain also, as new information comes in, is compared against your resident memory, your hubris part are those military related long-term memories you have in your head that you will try to carry from the public sector into the private sector. Some examples of that is thinking you can figure it out on your own, right? It's a military hallmark. But what you don't recognize is the environments are vastly different, vastly different. And this also creates the 2-year gap that we were talking about where performance is poor. The good news is after that 2 years, performance significantly increases. Thinking you don't need to change. This is very problematic. We'll get to how to actually be prepared here in a moment, but many of you think you don't need to change. Actually, the research might even be telling you that. So both of those together aren't really kind of helping out. Okay. Thinking the private sector needs a generalist. You've been a generalist your entire career. You will try to carry that over to the private sector. If you're looking for it specifically in LinkedIn, it's the servant leaders out there. I don't know what a servant leader is, and I was in the military 25 years. No one in the private sector knows what that means. And it doesn't mean that it's not important. It's just, you could see there's a significant misalignment to the private sector. And then unusual salary calculations, which I'll save that for next time, but it's funny. Okay. So here's how you get a job, right? I hate to be 45 minutes into this, but these are important and these are what our programs focus on. So let's do this. You need to change. Now, I'm not saying change completely, but you need to acknowledge that you need to self-transform, right? Why? You're leaving the less than 1% of the active component US population, less than 1%, and you're moving into the 93% non-veteran affiliated. They will be in your communities, in your churches, and in your company, hiring managers, executives, recruiters, you name it. So you got to be able to transform into something that they understand. Hand in hand with that, you must become aligned to the private sector's needs and wants. You are a generalist right now. The private sector needs and wants a specialist. They have a specific overhead that they can have in their company, a body count, which does specific tasks, and it's a very cost-based model. That means every single person has a very specific job, and you need to have a specific credentialed skill set to fill that job. And if you're not talking about that, you're just going to get lost in the shuffle because you can't articulate that. But once you do understand that from a business perspective, you can articulate your value to that much, much simpler. Okay, you need to be tech ready. This ties directly back to that digital avoidance, right? It's not just LinkedIn. You need to be able to proactively set up meetings and look polished and professional when you're out asking questions to people that are in companies. You do not ask people to set up a meeting for you. You do it. You're being not directive. You're being proactive in your self-transformation. You need to be able to reach out to these subject matter experts. And more importantly, you need to know what questions to ask them, right? That's going to get you farther down the road. Okay, and then finally, you need a sustained framework, tools, and support. I'm telling you right now, you can see it on LinkedIn all the time. Trolling social media will not work. Just looking at posts from all the influencers, and you know who they are, will not do it. Checklists, they drive me nuts, will not do it. The transition 1.0 construct will not work. You've already admitted that yourself. I'm just putting the mirror up, right? So we'll pause there real quick. I know we're getting short on time. My apologies. Any questions? Am I crazy?
Just maybe a quick minute if you want to tell us about your approach or your thoughts on skills bridge, because that is a keyword. There's being pushed down everybody's throat, right? Skills bridge, get a skills bridge, but I've seen people get a skills bridge and then walk out empty-handed.
Yep. So let me first say I'm a huge fan of the skill bridge concept. The concept is well received, but there's so much misinformation and not general lack of the second and third order effects of SkillBridge that are never discussed is something we'd like to talk about. If you've done your homework and you know what industry you want to go into and you've got candidate companies and you go into SkillBridge, awesome, winner, winner, bring it on. But what you don't know as a SkillBridge candidate is if you go into a company, there's no guarantee that they're going to have a job opening. Going back to what I just said, a company has a specific head count, which means they can't just add people into the head count. That isn't how it works. So if there happens to be a role open, it may or may not be actually in that SkillBridge that you're doing. So you can see there needs to be a lot of homework done beforehand to make sure you know what you're doing in the industry, have candidate companies. And once you do that, it can be a beautiful thing to do, SkillBridge. But I get more people contacting me saying, yeah, I'm 3 months into my SkillBridge and I know it's not what I want to do. And I'm like, wasting taxpayer money, wasting your time, wasting everybody's time, and it's just not good. So let me get to what we offer, right? We offer the employment prep course. And again, we've got some graduates in this group right now if you want to ask them questions. And I do not control anything they say, right? They could say all the good and the bad they want out of this program. It's a 5-week course, what we do. It's based on our proprietary cognitive neuroscience-based models. It's done via an online platform. So there's 20 to 40 minutes of knowledge transfer per week. You do these videos on your time. They're shorter videos, 5 to 10 minutes. People love that. At least the people have been through the courses thus far, and there's been 2 groups that have gone through so far. They can watch it on their own time. They could rewind it, watch it again. They could then, if they don't understand that concept, there's a 1-hour live Zoom call per week where they could talk to me as the coach, and they could bring up those questions. There's a private LinkedIn cohort page where you could talk to the group that's just in that cohort. And then there's, of course, one-on-one coaching with me if you've got other questions that aren't being answered in the LinkedIn group or in the Zoom call. We do have assignments because we need you to go do things, right? It's like riding a bike. You could read books on it all day long, but if you have to get on that bike and pedal, and in this course, we're going to take you out of your comfort zone and have you do things you're not used to, which is where you get the self-transformation. That's exactly where you get it. And then you actually, when you graduate, you fit into our alumni network, which then we have these discussions that are separate from everyone else because it's private. And that's where it gets really interesting because everybody's been through the program and has a similar experience. Okay, so let me show you the highlights of the course here real quick. So in week 1, all those all those challenges that we just talked to you about the 1.0 ecosystem are addressed in our course. Week 1 is being tech ready for transition. It's more than LinkedIn. It's an integration between Zoom, it's Gmail, it's Google Alerts. It's all these different integrations that you have to do right. And then you have to have the right script to talk to the people to make sure that you're growing your network, know what to talk to them about, know who to talk to. These are things that you have to be taught, or it's just like you're going to be spinning your wheels. Week 2 is really interesting because this is where we tell you about your internal unknowns. This is based on our cognitive neuroscience-based model, where we tell you those thoughts that are going on in your head. And then once you kind of understand what those thoughts are and how to identify them and flag them, you actually begin to reduce them. And then that's where in week 3, you're not fighting us on new knowledge because you know you'd fight us, right? If we don't address the way that you think and have you look at the way you think and challenge the way you think, when we start trying to give you new information about why the private sector is different, how they hire, what the different roles are, what they mean, what the levels are, all those different things, you would fight it in your head. So we need to remove it in week 2 and then put new information in there. And then week 4 and 5, you're iterating. And we have a model that we use, which is called the employment prep framework. And with that, you're going to be going and doing a bunch of things that you're not comfortable doing right now because you're a digital avoider, but we give you support and private groups and private coaching to make sure you're going to do that. So let me see here. Are there any questions? Like I said, we have a couple folks on here. We got Kevin and Bill. You can just leave it at that. If you have any questions to them because they've been through it, please go ahead and ask that, or you could ask me.
Hey, Jason, I do have a question. It's Steve Neiman.
Yeah.
Question about, so I'm still a few years out from transition, so this isn't directly related to PreVeteran per se, but I've always heard that going through the TAPS class or the GPS class twice is a good idea. Do you recommend that? I'm signed up here in a couple months, and I'm just going to go a few years from now. Thanks.
Oh, no worries. So I think there's actually going to be two questions in there. When should I start to transition? And I should have covered that before. The first one is we recommend 1 to 3 years anyway. 1 to 3 years. Why? Because remember the military transition 1.0 ecosystem is in the habit, and you're thinking that I should do it in my last 12 months. We think that's an awful idea because you triple your workload. You're doing your normal job. You got your normal family obligations. If you got families, you're doing training. On top of that, you're disentangling yourself from the military. You're doing your out processing, your VA medical stuff, dental, reading out from your clearance. That's your 2X. And then your 3X is supposed to figure out who I am, what I'm supposed to do, what I want to do a resume, do interviews, right? So you can see where it gets balled up. I'm saying you need to start much earlier, 1 to 3 years, one at a minimum. We can do shorter than that, but think of yourself as max stress. There's an inability to self-transform, right? Or it becomes harder because you have a hard stop that you're stressed about. We want to get you well before that. So I encourage you, please, to think about doing this much earlier. The other piece to that is do TAP twice. That sounds great. Everyone's experience, it's a checkbox, and you sit and listen intently for 30, 40 hours, and you're waiting for 5% of the information to be germane to you. And it's exhausting, right? So this is why we're saying there needs to be a different, highly individual program. Hopefully that helps answer.
Hey, Jason,
Yeah,
I'll
thank you so much.
chime in on
Totally
one
agree.
thing. I would tell you,
Thanks, Steve.
I took both TAP and ETAP, the executive TAP. As I trained, I just retired. Actually, I'm on my week 2 of my new job. I went through Jason's program. I'll tell you, at the times I took TAP first time like 6 years ago, and took it again a year ago, and ETAP earlier this year. The basic TAP, I think, helps you prepare to leave the military than it does post retirement. It was very more helpful on what I got to do to get out. But it didn't really help me much on what happens next. ETAP was a little helpful. It would focus a whole lot on interviews and a little bit on resume, but it really didn't help me on how to find a job. And so ultimately, both of those classes didn't really tell me how do I get a job. And so I ultimately was kind of clueless. So, I just retired as a MATSCOM A6. One of the people here on the group actually replaced me on that. And I thought I called up some retired GOs we used to work with and some peers, and I thought, hey, I'm going to retire, and you're going to want to hire me like that. I'm just here to talk to you about what job you're going to put me at. Nobody hired me. Nobody wanted me. None of that happened. And so I was clueless. And even worse, when they asked me, what is it that you want to do? And I'm like, I really don't know. I don't even know the menu of options. I don't even know what the jobs look like. I'm in the IT career field, cyber career field, but I don't know what that really looks like on the outside. And so I was just totally clueless when I had literally retired 3-star say, what do you want to do? And I really said, I really don't know. Ultimately, when they started talking about all the roles and responsibilities. And so just food for thought to think about it, what that even kind of looks like and what do you want to get into? Because I was clueless for several months to even how to get started. And I'll tell you, I went to, Jason and I went to basic training together 30 years ago. And so we did a lot together as freshmen at the Air Force Academy. And he taught me a lot and helped me going to where I needed to go. And I just, like I said, just 2 weeks ago, I started as a VP position in a financial institution. And so it's worked out. But I can answer any questions you want, any along the way about the program or my experience going through it too.
Appreciate that. And I don't want to brag too much on Kevin, but we were able, if you didn't see some of our posts, he took 2 classes, right? We got the employment prep and the salary course. We did a hybrid course for him because he was a really short timer. We made him an extra $40,000 from his original offer. So it's real, it works. So it's something that is just, again, there, if you think you need a choice, right, and you know that the original system is not working for you, we're just giving you another choice. I mean, it's as simple as that. I don't have to sell anything. You guys get to make the choice, right? So I'm going to finish up here. We don't have to go through the review of this, but I do want to bring this up. I know we're kind of running short. I will stay as long as there are questions, but this is the offer, right? First, I want to like change behavior here. This is very normal. Don't, when I give you an offer, just go, hey, yeah, it's a good offer. I want to take it or I don't. This is how the private sector works. I don't want you feeling weird about it. I don't want you overthinking it. It's something that is an offer to you based on what I just said before. And again, I'm expecting everybody on this call to be grown adults that can think for themselves and make decisions. So for this offer right here, this is going to be a 10% off because you were at this webinar. And this is what I said, this is the bonus at the end, yay, right? So this is going to be good till tomorrow night at midnight or 11:59 tomorrow Mountain Time, right? So this is the employment prep course, what we just talked about, going to military transition 2.0, addressing all the shortcomings of 1.0, and we're taking 10% off, which is basically $50. And again, the whole premise of this is getting you to think differently because that changes your behaviors, which changes your actions, which actually changes outcomes. And like I said, Kevin's here, Bill's here, Alexis is here to answer if you have any questions about that, because they've been through the course. Now, again, Kevin was the first one that has actually been placed. And to kind of go back to Steve's question that just a moment ago, the other three, Bill, Alexis, are 2 years out, just so you know. So people are starting to see much earlier in the pre-veteran, and that's exciting for us because there's a whole lot of development that can take place if we do it earlier. And the ecosystem is going to kind of build itself, which is even more exciting in my view. So are there any questions for me or any questions for Alexis, Bill, or Kevin? I forgot. No questions. There's got to be a question in there.
Well, kind of tangential question. I'm also interested in living overseas. So for the Australian residents, are you, just a quick survey, are you all there through government service or State Department and other things? Or are you entrepreneurs? Just curious.
This is Chris Singleton. I'm actually here on assignment at the DoD assignment at the U.S. Embassy.
It's like the best gig ever. You know what I mean?
Previously worked
Truly.
at NATO. I was assigned to NATO active duty as a commander before, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of civilian jobs working for NATO. So you can go there as an expat, and you get sponsorship to live in Europe and work for NATO. And they got a variety of different jobs depending on what you want to get into. So that's whatever you can look at to work overseas. And then just go to their website, and they got tons of jobs to hire.
Indeed. So, hey, I just put in the courses tab into the chat. So that's where you go to enroll in the course if that's something you want to do. And as you go through the checkout, putting in the 21-3 gives you the 10% off. The other thing I want to do is address the obvious elephant in the room. So there's going to be people, like I said, when I give you an offer, you're going to think about it. I remember being this way, right? I'm a lieutenant colonel. I'm like, offer. Haven't had one of those before because I've always been told what to do. So the offer here is, first, I want to address the elephant in the room. Why do we charge for courses? It is very, very simple. We're charging for courses because you need to prioritize your transition higher than other things in your life, which are frankly just noise. We've already discussed the 1.0 and how it doesn't set you up. The 2.0 is a specialized program that is here for you to support you for those things. And you need to prioritize your self-transformation above all the other stuff. We all know what happens with free training. There's a million studies out there, but you know it to be true when you do sit in on that training class. it's not transformational, it's transactional. And that's a big difference. And that's what we're trying to change. So that's why. And if there are any objections to any of this stuff, please let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions, concerns, or anything like that. I am respectful of people's time for sure. If you need to drop off, if you want to stay, again, if you've got questions, I'm here as long as you need me to be. So let me know if there's any questions, especially since Ingleton just got up, so he's got a full day ahead of him.
So you mentioned a salary course, because I feel like I'm already in a position that I don't see myself necessarily leaving early, anytime soon is what I'm trying to say. How does that work? Do I need to take, in your eyes, this and then the salary, or do I just say, hey, Jason, let's talk about my salary and where I'm at? And obviously take the course.
Well, I think, Fabio, you're in like a little bit different situation because, I mean, you've been in the corporate world since 2012. I mean, you understand how the private sector works in a much more, you're much more comfortable in that. So I don't think you'd have to do that. And again, I'm not here to dictate, you got to take the employment course before the salary course. But what I am telling you, and I've had this conversation with Kevin, I've pulled them apart because I know there's going to be people who need to learn about the private sector and who they are and what they want to do. And that's going to be iterative. It's got to be iterative, and it'll evolve and change. And then you do the salary course once you figure out what you're doing. So Fabio, I mean, I'm answering your question. You could easily take the salary course, but I want the others to know on the call, the salary course becomes challenging if you haven't gone through the self-discovery that we lead in the employment prep course.
Thanks.
Because like I'll share with you with Kevin, I mean, even though we had a shorter time, there was some ebb and flowing and evolving just in a short period of time for job options that he had, and obviously ended up with a very good job and awesome opportunity moving forward.
I'll tell you guys, I get told more times than I thought I'd ever be told no. Sorry, you're not qualified for this job. I'm like, really? I'm the CIO of a MassCom and I'm not qualified. Nope.
Next opportunity, man. I learned that a while ago. That's what it stands for. No, next up. Okay, you move on. I love it. I'm going to drop off, Jason. Really, thank you so much. I'll connect with you. I do have some other ideas and I want to show you those, when we get to talk, but I really appreciate the time. This is very insightful. Guys, good luck to you. If you guys want to find me on LinkedIn and connect, I wholeheartedly believe in networking. Every job that I've ever had has been because of my network. So,
yep, love it. So again, I'm happy to stick around. Does anybody have any more questions? I am very, very transparent. I will tell you. I will answer any question you got. Don't digital avoid. Give me a question.
This is Adrian. Since you're a lieutenant colonel, do you think that your experience as a lieutenant colonel made it easier for your transition into the private sector?
So great question. I would say actually no. Here, I'm getting a lot of feedback here. Hold on. Can I mute you, Adrian, real quick? So no, thanks for that. So it's a great question, and I think a lot of the folks were just explaining to that. I worked at the Pentagon for the last 6 years of my career, and I thought I understood what the private sector was because I had worked with Lockheed, Northrop, and Boeing, and everybody else. I had no clue. I had a complete understanding from the government perspective, not the private sector perspective. And the way they work behind the scenes, and then figuring out how to work with the government is an interesting kind of study in and of itself. To directly answer your question, is it helpful in the sense that I guess I had some credentialing? Yes, but it's not anymore, I would think, any big of a deal because our enlisted force is very educated, is very credentialed, and actually has done the work. Where I'd say a lot of even the senior officers out there, 05 and above, are actually just like managing people at this point. So you're actually closer to the tactile if you're enlisted doing those things. And then if you're credentialed on top of that, I actually think you're in a better position than officers are, frankly.
Copy. So I think I'm more on like the introverted side. So I think what I'm more interested about your program is, would your program be able to help me overcome that introvertness, to become more articulate? Because I'm scared of interviewing. I'm just going to be honest. Yes, there's been many times. I'm enlisted, master sergeant, in the material management career field, and I just trying to figure out, okay, like there's so, material management career field is it's so broad. There's different sections that I have at my disposal, and I'm just like, I don't know which one to choose. And
Yep.
it kind of leads back to, like, I have my bachelor's in business administration with a specialty in logistics, but I'm not sure if that's going to be good enough, for employers to look at me and be like, yeah, she's a good person to hire.
So first, thanks for sharing that. The other thing I would say is that what we provide in our training, and again, you can ask the Kevins and the Bills and the Alexis's, we give you actually templates to reach out to people and begin getting comfortable. The only way you're going to get comfortable and get over, and really, trust me, there's so many people we talk to that are introverts, but if they're given a template to follow to go talk to people, it becomes much more comfortable. And then when you do that and it's successful a few times, it reinforces itself, and it ends up being successful that way. Once you have the tools, again, and then the support, the kind of private support and the group support, it really is helpful. And then I think, again, a key piece is beginning to understand how the private sector, its needs and wants. Once you understand that from their perspective, you can think about how you fit into their profit-making enterprise much easier, which again, right now there's a lot of unknowns in your head. And I think that's a lot of the fear. And then you're kind of thinking the introvertedness that's part of that can be overcome. I'm confident.
Thank you very much. That makes
Sure.
That makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions?
I'll share with you.
Sorry.
Come on, Jacob. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just coming in late here. Is the webinar going to be recorded? Can I go back and watch it?
You bet. So if you're on this, I'm going to be sending out a link to you and everyone else for the recorded webinar for sure, so you can watch it again. You bet.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll tell the folks that were listening, one positive thing I thought of going through the course is, I did have mentors of people I did reach out to and I talked to, as I said, but you can only go to that well to ask questions so much. And sometimes you don't want to ask the stupid question to that mentor, right? Because you just don't want to do that, especially if you're talking to some senior folks. And so one thing I found of value when I was going through the program with Jason was being able to ask that stupid question, not have this fear of like, all right, I'm going to look like an idiot to this mentor. And so Jason was a mentor to me, but I didn't feel any apprehension about saying, I really am clueless on this, and talk to me about it. And what does this really mean? And kind of talked me through and educated me on all the silly questions that I was just totally clueless on, and how the industry works, or the process of hiring, or what does it mean to have, your count within, an organization, and do they have, head count, and what are they going through? And actually, Jason, I'm in the process of adding 10 new headcount in the organization for next year. So now I at least understand what the concept means. I had no clue what that even meant. And so that people, I talked to friends and I said, yeah, we'd love for you to come on over, but we don't have the headcount. And so I didn't really understand what that really meant. And so,
by the way, just to dispel a few rumors, and I really need to write about this more. If someone's telling you that they're going to create a role for you, don't believe them. That is not going to happen. I mean, an organization, again, like Kevin was just saying, does have a specific head count, which means executives all the way up to CEOs sometimes say this organization is going to have 20,000 people, 20,408 people. And they really break it down like that. And each individual role, when Kevin was just mentioning you're not qualified, they're looking specifically at the job description and seeing if he has the credentials to meet that job description. This is not rocket science in the slightest, but right now where you're at in the military and the 1.0 ecosystem, you are significantly not aligned. And you're not aligned, and no one's told you that you need to kind of change to become aligned to that. And I kind of take offense to that in the system because I don't think it's there for you. I don't think it's there helping you. So that's something that we want to bridge, is to make sure that you're getting the tools you need to make those decisions, to do things that are good for you and your family if you have a family. And that's what the program's all about. Jamie, any more, man? You got any more questions? Everybody's, I think, checking out, man.
No, I'm still here. It's good. That was good. Good information. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Does anybody else have any more questions? Again, I mean, I'm here to answer any question you got. Doesn't have to be related to this. I'm here for you guys. So hit me up. Otherwise, I could bring it to an end. What I have here on the next slide is my email address. I mean, I'm sure a couple of you have gotten emails from. Anyway, you can reach out anytime to me, jason@preveteran.com. Again, sometimes I know it's the digital avoider thing, but you don't like to ask questions in a group. Totally get it. I usually get a lot of really interesting emails based on that. So I'm happy to answer those questions if you want to do it in another setting. The other thing is I want to give you my LinkedIn profile. If you haven't connected with me, let me get that for you. Put it in there. Here we go. Put that in the chat. Make sure it's going to everybody. There we go. So that is my LinkedIn profile. You can connect with me. You can follow some of the stuff I talk about. I publish articles a lot. Our PreVeteran website has all that information on there too. Okay. All right, if there are no more questions, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. I really, again, very much appreciate you taking the time. I know people are busy, so we're going to sign off here. I will post this. You will get an email with the link to this recorded session, so you can look through it again. And if you have any questions in the interim, hit me up on LinkedIn, hit me up on email. Really appreciate it. Kevin, thanks for those comments. And if anybody needs anything, please reach out to me.